Welcome into another edition of the 24/7 Sports Football Recruiting Podcast. It is Thursday, September 22nd, as we bring you a little closer to the big college football weekend. Doesn't get much bigger than Florida, Tennessee, number 20 versus number 11 in Neyland Stadium, Knoxville, Tennessee. We've got Ryan Callahan, recruiting insider at Vols 24/7, joining us to break down the big weekend for the Vols and looking ahead a bit to the importance and the significance of what we could expect in Knoxville. First of all, Ryan, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing, my friend?
Doing well. I hope you're doing well. Yeah, big week here in Knoxville. So lots to talk about and plenty of fun things going on this week on Go Vols 24/7, obviously.
Absolutely. This has been building up, right? I think this has been in the works for a long time. The anticipation has been brewing for this fan base, for people that just follow college football and are looking at what Tennessee is doing. A top 10 recruiting class right now, number 9 nationally, obviously spearheaded by that 5-star quarterback, Iamaleava from California. They've been recruiting nationally. They have a lot of buzz. And this is the game, this is the atmosphere, this is the moment and the stage for that coaching staff to potentially take Tennessee's recruiting to another level.
Absolutely. And these are always, Florida and Alabama are kind of the two big home games on Tennessee's schedule. This happens every other year, and these are always kind of the marquee events for Tennessee. But like you said, there's a little more behind it this year. You've got a team that's on the verge of cracking the top 10, an offense that puts up a lot of points, that has more people talking. And a top 10 recruiting class already led by a 5-star quarterback. So just a lot more buzz about Tennessee right now than even typically going into this game. Sometimes they get a lot of prospects on campus for these games, but there are a lot of guys Tennessee finishes 3rd and 4th for against some of the real heavy hitters in the SEC. This year, it looks like Tennessee's really in the discussion for some guys who are going to be visiting this weekend. And even in future classes, it looks like this is the type of weekend that could really lay the groundwork for Tennessee and kind of keep things building on and off the field.
A lot of the heavy lifting has already been done in the offseason. We had you on this show later in the spring or early summer, and we were discussing the tactics, right? The photo shoots, some of the recruiting things that the staff was doing to build buzz heading into the season. Now the season's here, and the buzz has been building with their play on the field. This is a chance for Josh Heupel and that offense, and I think the team as a whole to really show the direction, the trajectory of this program. What's the buzz been like among recruits about what they've seen from Tennessee on the field this season?
Yeah, I think they like what they've seen so far. Now, Tennessee is 3-0, but the caveat to that is their only real test has been against Pitt, and that was a ranked opponent at the time. Tennessee went on the road and won. Didn't get a lot of style points maybe for that game. It was kind of an ugly game on both sides. Keaton Slovis, the quarterback at Pitt, was knocked out late in the first half of that game. So Tennessee kind of held on in not eye-popping fashion, but still had a good enough game to get a nice win on the road. And that's gotten Tennessee some credit among recruits for backing up kind of what they've been selling about the trajectory of the program. But at the same time, this is where I think prospects are really going to start watching Tennessee a little more closely. SEC games like Florida, like LSU in a couple weeks going on the road, Alabama after that, Kentucky, Georgia. Can they start to make a move a little bit in the SEC and creep up the SEC standings? I think that's what people want to see. The ones who are looking at Tennessee kind of already feel good about the trajectory of the program, I think. But I think they want to see, can Tennessee, which has only beaten Florida once in the past 17 years, can they get over that hump and start getting some of these quality wins against the rivals that have kind of helped hold Tennessee down over the past 15 years?
21 commitments already for Tennessee in the 2023 recruiting cycle. And they have a couple official visitors on campus this weekend. It's a little bit different than what we saw during the offseason, obviously with the staff having to focus on game prep and meeting with the team and focusing on the actual game against Florida. There won't have to be a lot of juggling around, right, with the mass number of official visitors. 4-star defensive lineman Daevin Hobbs, as well as offensive lineman Vysen will be the 2 official visitors. What can you tell us about Tennessee's chances with each of those prospects?
Yeah, and just to add to that real quickly, Tennessee, like a lot of staffs around the country, I think likes to save those official visits for after the season when you're not having to juggle that stuff. So that's the one reason I think you don't see more official visits this weekend, and you want to get closer to guys' decision times. In the case of both of these guys, I think Daevin Hobbs and Vysen are not necessarily all that close to making decisions, but Tennessee's in some big-time battles, especially for Daevin Hobbs, and you kind of got to take what visit opportunities you have. In this case, Tennessee's battling Alabama and Georgia primarily for Daevin Hobbs. He's a defensive line target that Tennessee offered back in June. They've had him on campus a handful of times dating back to last summer, but really starting to get some traction, I think, over the past couple months in that one. But at the same time, Alabama has continued to turn up the heat on him. Georgia is now a heavy contender for him. So it's a big-time battle, and this is a really important visit for Tennessee. I think he is maybe more open to Tennessee than people might think, just hearing that Alabama and Georgia are involved. But obviously the competition is tough, so Tennessee really needs to put its best foot forward. I always say the outcome of an individual game like this can be overblown, but if you have a really good weekend and get a nice win over a ranked Florida team, and Daevin Hobbs gets to take in that environment and really gets impressed by it, that could make more of a lasting impression that gives them a better shot when he makes a decision probably in November. Vysen Lang, I think Tennessee's the team recruiting him the hardest right now among his 5 or 6 teams that he's still considering. LSU, Auburn, Georgia, Arkansas, and Texas are kind of the other main contenders. He's been to LSU and Auburn already this season. So this is a big chance for Tennessee to try to make a move there. He's already been to Tennessee a couple times earlier this year, but wants to take in a game and is really excited to see the game day environment in Knoxville. So those are important visits and two of the more important known targets that are left on the board for Tennessee. But they're still at a point where they're sort of filling out their board, looking for new targets at some positions, but those are guys that have been on the board for a long time. And especially in Hobbs' case, he might be the top name left on Tennessee's board. So that's obviously a really important visit.
Yeah, the trenches, a point of emphasis for Tennessee is they try to put the finishing touches here on this 2023 recruiting cycle with a couple months to go into the early signing period. Who else will be at the stadium? We're going to get into it here on the 24/7 Sports Football Recruiting Podcast after the break. We're back on the 24/7 Sports Football Recruiting Podcast, taking a look at Tennessee's big recruiting opportunity as they take on Florida inside Neyland Stadium on Saturday afternoon, primetime matchup, national television. It's going to be a really good opportunity for Josh Heupel to continue to build recruiting buzz for this program. Blair Angulo, joined by Ryan Callahan. He's a recruiting insider over at Vols 24/7, the Tennessee site on the 24/7 Sports Network. And Ryan, we teased it a little bit to official visitors, but that's not it. The visitor list as a whole looks really attractive when you take a look at some of the 2024 prospects.
Yeah, that's where really the bulk of the visitors are coming from. It looks like, at least as of right now, with the added caveat that Tennessee always could have some names added to this list over the next 48 hours. But certainly Tennessee expecting to make some real ground with some 2024 targets. Guys like in-state targets, Edwin Spillman, Caleb Beasley, some in-state guys Tennessee's been recruiting for a long time. Those are 4 stars, 2 of the top players in the state of Tennessee in that class, and even some 5 stars in multiple classes. Obviously, Nico Iamaleava, the 5-star quarterback commitment, will be in town. But in the 2024 class, Ryan Wingo, a 5-star receiver from St. Louis, who visited Tennessee back in early June, he'll be back in town for this game. Happened to see Tennessee on the road at Pitt a couple weeks ago as well. So he's definitely taking a little bit more of a look at Tennessee, and this is a big visit for them to try to be a contender with him. Even in future classes, 2025 prospects like Cameron Sparks that Tennessee is already heavily involved with in-state. That's a 5-star early in that class. Jonathan Eccles, the 5-star Tennessee commitment in the 2024 class. So some big name guys across multiple classes. And in that 2024 class, especially, a number of 4-stars. That's just kind of the tip of the iceberg. But Mario Craver, a 4-star receiver from Alabama that Tennessee is one of the top contenders for. So lots of big name prospects that Tennessee's going to be involved with for months. And as you know, Blair, these visits in the fall, they might not get as much attention sometimes, the juniors who are visiting as opposed to the seniors. But these visits are really important. They kind of lay the groundwork for everything you end up doing the following spring and summer. So for Tennessee, especially these guys like Caleb Beasley and Edwin Spillman, who visited Tennessee 5, 6, 7 times already, these are important to keep building on that early relationship. And in some cases, first or second visit, these can be really important to really kind of establish Tennessee as a legitimate contender for some good players.
Yeah, that's a good segue, because I wanted to ask you about the overall trajectory of this program, right? I think recruits in the 2024 class, in the 2025 class, if they're inside the stadium on Saturday and Tennessee's putting in a good performance against Florida, it's a top 25 matchup. I think all the eyes around the country will be on this game. And they're in there and they're looking and they're saying, oh, Tennessee, number 9 recruiting class nationally right now in the cycle. And if I come in there there, I can be another piece of what they're trying to build. What's the ceiling for Tennessee in recruiting? Could this potentially be a program that could potentially fight for a top 5 class?
This year might be a little bit early for that, but I definitely think that's a possibility in the not too distant future, at least for Tennessee, the way things are headed. I do think this is a program that's had enough success in recruiting consistently over the years that we've seen, even with a few different staffs that have not worked out at Tennessee long term, they've continually signed top 15 classes nationally. So it's a place where you clearly can recruit. Now it's a matter of, can you get it back to that level that Butch Jones signed a top 5 class at Tennessee in 2014. Or 2015, I should say. Can you get it back to that level? And where Philip Fulmer had it, obviously 15 years ago, signing some classes that were sometimes in that discussion for number 1 overall. You got a long way to go to get back to that because of how good Georgia and Alabama have been and continue to be, kind of setting the pace nationally. But I think they can get back in that discussion if they continue on this path. They've got to get to 9 wins, frankly, first. That's the first big checkpoint. Hard to do that consistently and recruit at that level when you're not winning more than 8 games a season, as the case has been for Tennessee for a number of years now. But if they can get back to that 9-10 win mark, start contending for SEC East championships, then maybe that opens the door for that. So this year, I think a top 10 class would be a really nice finish for Tennessee. They're at number 9 right now, as you mentioned. They've had some guys that they landed earlier in the year climb in the rankings recently because they're having good senior seasons. So they're evaluating pretty well, I think. But they've still got to go in there and land some of these big time kids that have been tough for them to win those battles in past years. I think they're getting there, as they showed with Nico Iamaleava, but can they start winning them more consistently? I think within the next couple of years you could see it, but they're not there just yet.
We wondered back in the spring when Nico Iamaleava announced his decision and said he was going to be committing to Tennessee, what the impact would have on this class and in future classes for the Vols. What kind of impact have you seen? What kind of buzz have you heard about what that has meant for Tennessee recruiting?
Well, I think the biggest thing has been he's kind of opened some doors that maybe otherwise would not have been opened, and it's not always worked out for Tennessee, but they've gotten themselves really in the mix for a lot of players that took a hard look at Tennessee, even if they've committed to other schools. Earlier this year, it looked like Tennessee at one point might land Kyler Casper, the 4-star receiver who ended up at Oregon and reclassified and went to Oregon in the 2022 class. Carnell Tate, the big-time wide receiver, picked Ohio State over Tennessee after a big-time battle. Tennessee maybe still not completely out of the picture there. So those are guys that took a hard look at Tennessee and liked the idea of going there, in part because of the opportunity to team up with a big-time quarterback. And without Nico Iamaleava in Tennessee's class, I'm not sure the Vols get much of a look from either of those guys, or certainly wouldn't have ended up being one of the 2 finalists essentially for both of them. So that's just one example.
I even think about a player like Francis Mauigoa, right, who spent some time with Nico Iamaleava, one of the better offensive tackles in the country. And I'm not sure, like you mentioned, had Nico not committed to Tennessee as early as he did, if the Vols are even in that conversation.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was headed next. That's certainly an example where I think, and you're seeing this more now. Tennessee has made an addition to its staff, hiring Aaron I hope I'm not mispronouncing this. Aaron Amama, who is.
I got you right here. I got you. It's okay. Aaron Ama.
Yeah, hadn't clarified that pronunciation, but he's been added to Tennessee staff, and so you can see them kind of tapping into that Polynesian culture that they already have. I think added to the program with Nico Iamaleava. So I think they feel that that's opened some doors for them, just having that familiar background with some of those guys, that Tennessee's going to be able to go out west and be more of a player for some of those guys. So I think it's opened up some opportunities that previously weren't there. And some guys great players want to play with great players. So having that 5-star quarterback has given them some name recognition that I think got them some visits, at least from some guys that otherwise might not have given Tennessee much of a look. Now it's a matter of seeing how many of them can they land, but it's at least put Tennessee in the discussion for some really good players.
Yeah, Nico Iamaleava will be in Tennessee for this game. But I did want to ask you, Ryan, will the G-Wagon make a return? Will that photo shoot happen again? Will he maybe have some friends with him in that vehicle?
I don't know about the G-Wagon returning, but I bet they have some fun with the photo shoot no matter what. Every time Nico Iamaleava is back at Tennessee, the photo shoot is definitely one of the highlights of the weekend. He usually brings other targets and commitments into the fold, and they have some fun with that. So he will no doubt be putting on the recruiter hat this weekend. One example of that, for instance, his effect has already kind of had been shown in future classes. Boo Carter, an in-state target for Tennessee in the 2024 class, actually went to Chicago, played in the Pylon National Championship with Nico Iamaleava's team, which is based in California. But he called him up, said, hey, want to come up and play? And he did. So now there's a connection between two guys in different classes who are from across the country from one another. So that's just one of the guys he'll be recruiting this weekend. But certainly I think you'll see him do a lot of recruiting while he's in Knoxville, and certainly we'll at least have some fun with, I'm sure, the photo shoots that they will have, whether it includes a G-Wagon or not.
Yeah, if you want all the latest on Tennessee recruiting, especially from this weekend, and whether or not Tennessee breaks out the G-Wagon again in the tunnel at Neyland Stadium, make sure you stay locked into Go Vols 24/7 and recruiting editor Ryan Callahan. Ryan, thank you so much for joining us. Enjoy the game, and make sure you charge your phone. I know you're going to be making a lot of phone calls this weekend.
No doubt. It'll be a busy one, but I appreciate that, Blair. Thanks a lot.
All right. That is Ryan Callahan. You can follow him on Twitter at Ryan Callahan 24/7. If you like the show, please give us a like on YouTube. Subscribe to the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. Give us those 5-star reviews wherever you find your podcast. For Ryan Callahan and our producer, Lance Glynn, I am Blair Angulo. Thank you so much for tuning into this edition of the 24/7 Sports Football Recruiting Podcast.